To look at profit, we have to look at revenue minus costs. We don't have full control over revenue because the market sets the price, not us. Cost, we do have control over. And here's where we've got to look at those things. We analyze costs. They can be fixed, they can be variable. One of the most important of all will be marginal cost, the change in total cost associated with one additional unit of output. That's the one we'll use a lot of times. We have to be real clear on the difference between a fixed and a variable cost. Fixed costs are those costs that do not change with production. Things like plant and machinery. If I produce zero output, I will still have to pay those fixed costs. There's no way around that. Variable costs are those costs that change with production. Easiest things to think of here will be labor and raw materials. As production goes up, variable costs go up. Now we analyze most of those in the average section. We look at them as averages to get it down to that per unit value. If we look at total costs, they are simply fixed costs plus variable costs. That's their relationship. So it follows that average total cost will be equal to average fixed costs plus average variable cost. That's what we're going to see. Now, this can also be looked at graphically, and I want to show you that. Average fixed costs. Average fixed costs are equal to fixed costs divided by quantity. So what you see in the average is them constantly falling. The numerator here, fixed cost, is something that stays the same, whereas quantity grows. I'll give you an example. If it costs $1,000 in fixed cost, if I produce one unit, what is the average fixed cost? $1,000. Raise that to 2, the average fixed cost suddenly drops to $500. At 3, it's $333. At 4, on my quantity, it's $250. You can see that number keeps coming down. So it's getting cheaper per unit in average fixed costs. At the same time that's going on, average variable costs are rising. It gets more and more expensive per unit as we go. Variable costs will always rise as production increases. These two are added together to get total costs. So what you see in total costs is a U-shaped curve up here. Average total cost. It will decline at first as average fixed costs bring it down, and then increase as average variable costs take over. This is almost complete. We have one more line to add to that. That line is the marginal cost line. Marginal costs, the change in the total cost associated with the last. When marginal costs are less than average costs, when the last unit you add to it is less than the average, it brings the average down. So if marginal cost is lower than the average total cost, we know that the average total cost curve is still falling. It's at that point where marginal cost intersects that we achieve what we call the minimum average total cost. Minimum average total cost. And anytime marginal cost is above the line, if you add the last that is higher to something that's average, it brings that average up. And that's what you're seeing here. This graph is extremely important. It's important to know the relationships between these factors. And you can see that graphically on this. It's a very important part. A lot of students have issues with this, have difficulty. I want you to be familiar with what will affect what here. Be very clear on what we're talking about with these different abbreviations. Probably the most difficult part of your next exam will be keeping these straight. And I want you to be very, very careful of that. Thank you, and this is this section.